Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode of TC Live, hosted by TechCabal. I will be your host and moderator. My name is Kelechi Njoku, senior editor at TechCabal. So I will be hosting this session and moderating it with you. So just a little bit about TechCabal. So TechCabal speaks to the business and human impact of tech and innovation in Africa through high quality articles, reports, and events like this. We also publish the TC Daily newsletter, which is a comprehensive roundup of tech news and events across Africa. If you're not subscribed to it, the link to do so will be posted in the chat room, so you can sign up right away. So for this session, of course, as you know, we host TC Live pretty much every Friday, and we bring industry players in the tech ecosystem across Africa to discuss various topics. And today's subject is on building successful products for the African market. Building successful products for the African market. It's a very timely topic because right now in the ecosystem, there are lots of conversations around products, when to launch them, when to expand them, who a product manager is, and so on. And my guests happen to be seasoned product managers, and they're going to share their insights and their knowledge about what they do, its perils, its challenges, its surprises and successes, and so on. And they're just going to answer all of your questions during this session. So the speakers I'm going to have with me on this live Makera Kigbara. So Makera is the principal product manager at M-KOPA, and he leads several product teams delivering digital financial services to M-KOPA customers across multiple African countries. Before M-KOPA, he held numerous product roles for companies like Intuit, Thomson Reuters, Monies, and Flutter Entertainment. A global citizen at heart, Makera is a Tanzanian national based in London, having previously worked in Switzerland, Singapore, and the US. My second guest is Tolulope Saba. Tolu is a product leader with years of knowledge and experience designing and scaling digital products. He works closely with founding members as well as small and medium-sized teams to create and maintain design and product philosophies that scale as the business grows. Tolu's experience cuts across fintech, edtech, transportation, commerce, and more recently Web3 spaces. My third guest is Yarmirama Ashama. Yarmirama Ashama is a senior product manager at Cowrywise, a digital-first wealth management platform building products to help individuals and businesses easily access wealth management services, cultivate better financial behavior, and make the most out of their money. So beyond Cowrywise, beyond her work at Cowrywise, Yami, as she's fondly called, is an occasional singer and songwriter, Bible teacher, product management tutor, and mentor. Yami has also previously taught user experience and interface design at Mountaintop University, helping the students discover the world of digital product design and empowering them with a fundamental knowledge of the field to kickstart a career in design or application of design principles in whatever field they end up in. And my fourth guest is Busayo Oladejo. So Busayo Oladejo is a product manager at Big Cabal Media, which is home, where she works with a team of creatives to deliver and grow Zikoko's platform for creating and discovering culturally relevant and trendy meme content. Previously, she worked with the Co-Creation Hub, leading their design lab to collaborate with the Nigeria Institute for Medical Research to deliver a COVID data management system in the heat of the pandemic and a digital platform for video observed therapy for tuberculosis patients. Busayo has also worked in the B2B space, developing the first version of the Scasius no-code platform for process automation. Busayo, Makera, Yami, Tolu, welcome to TC Live today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelechi.
Yeah, it's really exciting to have you guys here on the chat, and I'm really going to get into it. But before we get into it, we have just a presentation from TC Insights about some data that we have uncovered about product management across the continent. So basically, this is why is product management important? And so the first slide you see here is who decides when a new product is launched, right? So building a product, of course, is a complex experience and it involves a lot of people across departments, often working cross-functionally and stuff. And as you can see in the slide, the product team has like the biggest slice of the pie. So 50% of what is involved in launching a product goes to the product team. Other members of the team get 7%, sales and marketing 12, and executive leadership 31%. And on the next slide, what you're going to see is how vital, right? The figures you're seeing here show how important product management is and why startups should pay attention to it, right? So 17% of startups fail because of poor products and 13% fail because the launch of the product is poorly timed. And you can also see that there are other statistics there, such as 40, which is the largest slice of the pie there, failing because there's no market need for the product. So basically, this entire slide just shows you, by the time you go to other slides in this presentation, you're going to see things that give you facts and figures about why a product manager feels important, the challenges you face in your roles, and how startups can benefit from what you bring into the business based on what you know and how you make products to fit what customers want and all of that. So that's our presentation, and a lot of what you're going to see that, in fact, this particular slide really interests me because now it shows that the fintech industry employs way more product managers than other industries, and that's a question that I'm going to discuss with you guys in the course of this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I think we have the basics or the meat of what this presentation is about, and so that is a great primer, a great way to segue into the conversation. And so that presentation was put together by TechCabal Insights, which is our events, research, and data analytics arm. And they are an Africa-focused digital economic consultancy that leverages big data to help startups, investors, operators, big tech companies, government, and other ecosystem players on and off the continent to answer specific questions and implement key. So that's this Insights. We are also the organizers of TC Live, which is where we are right now. So the agenda for this slide is very simple. We're going to have 45 minutes of unbroken conversation between me, the moderator, and our speakers. And then we're going to have 35 minutes of Q&A where you get questions from the audience and you answer these questions, right? So please, so members of the audience, as we are having this conversation, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box, and we're definitely going to get to them after the main segment of the chat is. So once again, welcome everyone, and I hope we have a very great conversation today. So I'm just going to jump right into it, and I want to start from the very beginning. So Busayo, Makera, I'd really love to hear from both of you on this. What exactly does a product manager do?
Busayo, you want to go first? Ladies first, or I can go?
Okay, cool. So Busayo.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so funny, I was in a conversation once and someone asked me to explain what the product manager does to 5 years. I think that's the hardest question I've ever had to answer in my entire life. But typically, I think how I try to describe it as easily as possible is you want to build something, right? There's so many moving parts, right? There's the research that you need to do. There's the people that need to, maybe I guess you want to build a house. There's the architect that needs to put together a few things. There's the people that will lay the blocks and things like that. Very likely these people speak, different languages because they are focused on different parts of a business. So I see the product manager as that center that brings everybody together, that has that, big picture view of the entire product, not just the product, but and the perspective of the company, but also looking from the perspective of the user who is going to use it. Is this even like sort of going to provide some value for them and also provide some value for the company? And in some sort of big way, that is how I see myself in every product that I work in. Yeah, that's how I think of what a product manager does. And it might take different shapes and sizes and forms in different projects.
So yeah,
I'm quite struck by what you said about that's a very difficult question to answer. I didn't imagine that could be.
It's 5-year-olds.
Is it difficult for you as well?
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think a product manager can put on many different hats. So everything Busayo said is absolutely correct. The way I like to think of it is I am the kind of voice of the customers in the roles that I've taken on throughout my career. I am the person in the business that represents that is supposed to kind of coagulate all the kind of customer requirements and represent the voice of the customer. And that interfaces with the commercial teams, the support teams, the development teams, and you all come together to build a product that works both for the customer, the business, and also, if you have investors, for investors. So that's the way I see the role as the product manager. In other industries, especially in the States, they like to think of it as like the quarterback of the team, or if for football fans, and I'm a football fan, the midfield of the team, Zinedine Zidane, if you want.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you're the middleman between the customer and the developers. Because oftentimes people talk about how developers can be, way in their heads about what they want to solve, and sometimes forget what the customer actually wants and how they actually want to experience the product. So now that we understand what a product manager does, and it's an ever-evolving role, so perhaps 2 years from now, we're going to have different definitions of what a product manager does. So I'm curious, and I'm just going to go around everyone for this question. How and why did you get into product management? So would you like to go first?
Okay, I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so how and why? I would say it was born out of necessity. I work at Brass. Before Brass actually went public, to the general population, we had an idea a couple of years back, and the co-founders were building it, trying to see, how the product could, take shape and evolve, right? And I joined in then, and I started off as a designer. So, after, years of iteration, designing and redesigning, we decided to come up with, Brass as a business bank or financial software for businesses in Africa. Now, the founder, the CEO, Shala, he's a product person. He has, really deep product background, years of experience doing that. He was head of product at Kudi, now Number. So I had, guidance from him. And when the product started, growing, we realized that the CEO had other things to do. He had to think about fundraising. He had to think about maintaining the structure and balance, culture, and all of that. So he couldn't do all of that. And at that point, we had already launched a couple of products, about 3 products then, and it was becoming kind of a hassle, trying to own the evolution of these products, right? And CEO couldn't do all of that. So we needed somebody within the team, because at that point, we're trying to manage resources as much as, we can. So we need somebody within the team that has not just a thorough background and thorough insight into what the product does, but somebody that has an idea of how the evolution could be, what the product could be 1 year from now, 2 years from now. And that person happened to be me, because outside of the co-founders and myself, we had engineers who were just focused on building stuff out there. So I had to fill in that vacuum. And since then, I haven't looked back.
Right. So, and before you filled in that role, had you ever heard anything about product management? Was it familiar to you in any way?
Oh, absolutely. Prior to that, I've been a designer for about 6 years now. So I've worked with tons of them. Like they're usually not people that product manage. Like it's a very thankless job, right? They're usually not the people you smile with. They're like taskmasters. Let me just put it that way. So you have that relationship with them, and then when you realize that you're becoming one of them, it's always a very weird mental space. But you'd accept it.
So are you a taskmaster in your role now?
Well, when you need to be, you have to be one.
So Yami has to get into product management. How and why?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So for me, I think it started from, so I had this time where I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And at the time, I was very interested in, the old digital media, social media thing just started to really take a peak. And I was interested in, understanding that. So along the way, I started designing websites on WordPress for people. And I would realize that I would spend, so ideally, say you're supposed to work on a website for 2 weeks, right? And then 3 months down the line, we're not sure what we're doing. And I started to realize that for most of those people, it was because at first there was no clarity as to why they were doing what they wanted to do and what they were looking to achieve. So I didn't exactly know that there was something called product management at that time. But I just knew that there was a gap somewhere between the people I was working with and the eventual work that I was doing. So I think then I thought of it more as product design. So that was kind of how I went into product design, learned a bit there. And around, while doing all of that, I figured out, okay, maybe UX is like the part that I would probably stick with and not do the UI part. And then I got a job at Cowrywise. So I actually joined Cowrywise as a product specialist. And all the way from, the interview and then eventually just talking with my boss then, I think it was just clear, like, so what's your plan, right? Like, what are you looking to evolve into? And then we had that conversation, and long story short, I eventually ended up in product management. So I think why would be that I really just wanted to help people have clarity as to what it is that they want to build and why they're building it. So we don't end up spending 3 months for something that should have taken us 2 weeks. That was kind of like what, led me there eventually.
Yeah, but something that strikes me about what you have described is how when you were building websites, so when we're looking at websites as products, so this looks like products that are coming from, say, developers or creators themselves, right? So I'm thinking of how, what are your ideas on your role now when it comes to consumers themselves, like users of the product, users that didn't build that product?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you take that again?
So you described in your when you're talking, you talked about the fact that you were building websites and then these people sometimes didn't know what they wanted and all of that. So what I'm wondering about is you consider these people users in the way you consider the users of, say, apps users, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically my question. They are users to you.
Yeah, well, they are users to me, but I think the way to look at it fully would be that so if we're to paint a picture, they would probably be the creators, and then they have people who they're actually building those websites for, right? And they have goals that they are trying to achieve with the websites. So that's kind of like finding that balance between what does the business want to achieve and then what would users also want to achieve. So I think somewhere along the line, right, that was kind of what I picked. Like there was no clarity as to what they were trying to do and no clarity as to who were even trying to build this for and what kind of actions or what kind of jobs to be done for it to go by that framework. What kind of jobs or use cases do users actually have that we're trying to cater to? So that was kind of where the gaps were.
All right, yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Busayo, how did you get into product management?
Right. So just a quick before that follow up to what you said about considering the people that use apps and the website as users. Personally, I consider anybody that interfaces with anything that you create a user. So even if it's just a one pager, whoever is the audience, if you sing, whoever is listening to your music is using it for something, maybe to feel good or whatever it is. If you cook good, whoever is eating it is your user. So if we consider everything in product, anybody that interfaces with it, whether they act on it or not, they are sort of users. But over to how I join in, very similar to Yami actually. So well, but I started with a little bit of background in project management, and I sort of at the end of university, I started to pick up, PHP. And to be honest, it was just because my friends were doing it at the moment. I just wanted to feel among. And so I started in that line, and then moved a little bit closer into, I started doing, WordPress websites. I moved into the co-creation of, actually, my first product management job, I started actually as a WordPress backend developer. But because I had some, background in project management from like internships and things like that before, I started to show some interest in what, my boss then was doing, Desiree of Ulysses. And, just moving closer to what she was doing, I would, regularly offer to, work with her on some things. And then, it became, this is kind of like where I want to be. I want to have a big picture of what we're doing, what we're building, because I felt like I could do better than just, like type, and say like, write the codes, I could think around, what exactly do the users want? How should we achieve this and things like that. And it just started like that, started like with sort of like an internship, sort of like shadowing role. And, I fell in love really. And it was like a lot of experimental products that we were working on, like I mentioned earlier, medical research, working with researchers. Every single thing we did was a bit of a surprise for me. So I had a great time with my first gig, and I just realized this is where I want to be. So that's it for me, really.
So at what point did it click that you have arrived, that you're home?
Okay, I think the first time it clicked.
I can relate to that stumbling through. Like just you're talking before it has.
Yeah.
This is the.
Yeah, I really stumbled through a lot of mistakes, by the way. But I remember, I think the first time I realized that you're doing this thing is, the head of products left, right? And I was the only one available that had the most experience on this very important research project that we have been doing forever. And it was like, they just threw me out to the wolves, and I was just like going up and down. And it came out like a huge success, and at the end of the day, we were able to sort of like work together to deliver something that helped, people that had real problems, and, help them finish their treatment. I was so proud of it. I think that was the moment to click. I'm still proud of it till today, so I like to bring it up every now and then. So.
Yeah, and those are the career moments that we live for, right? When the person above you just goes away, and you're like, oh my God, it's me, Christmas. And you just realize that.
I mean, for good reasons.
All of these things that you didn't think you knew, you actually know them, and then you just go from there. Yeah, very beautiful moment there. Makera.
Yeah, so I'll answer the question kind of in two with 2 points. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Cool, sweet. So yeah, I'm probably the most kind of senior kind of tenured person on the call. I can tell. Don't be fooled by the baby face. I'm actually a lot older, but I started in product management really by mistake. What I wanted to initially to be back then was go into finance. And that's where I started. So straight out of university, I started with a company called Thomson Reuters. For those of you who know, like Thomson Reuters, Bloomberg, that sort of thing. I joined on their graduate program, and it had 3 different rotations across the world. And on the 3rd rotation, they were like, hey, do you want to be a product manager? At that time, I won't tell you what year it is, because you don't need to know that. At that time, there was no information on the web. So I joined as a product manager, not really knowing what it is.
What year was it?
Now you're going to force me to tell, I guess my age, but this must have been in 2003 or 4. So 2003 or 4, I joined on this product called Reuters Wealth Manager. And very quickly, I fell in love with the concept because, like I said earlier, it was something where you interface with, leadership, commercial teams, the development teams, the designers, as Tolu was mentioning. So if you like to be someone who collates information that influences people, that's really fantastic. And then since that first role, every single role up till then has been a product-led roles. So I've had, product management roles, I've had founder roles, and now what's interesting for me and maybe what I can kind of instill to other folks is this is actually my first product role in an African context. Most of my experience has been focusing on the US customers focusing on Asian customers, European customers. So I'm interested in now at M-KOPA, which is fantastic for me because, origin of Tanzanian origin is the focus for African customers. The last thing I will say is that I think if there's anyone in the, like in the chat who wants to get into product management today, it's a lot different from when I was starting. There's a ton of information that's free. You can find on YouTube. There's a lot of courses that are free. So maybe, we can post some links on the chat, but there's tons of stuff out there that will give you the disciplines, will give you the frameworks to be a product manager. Okay, I'll stop.
So I just want to draw you back to something just very quickly. So you mentioned that this is your first role that faces your first product management role that faces African customers. So how is it different from, how are you finding it as different from what you were from the other product roles when you were facing like US customers and stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. So like I think if we think of it from a product process perspective, so everything a product manager does, the company that I work for, M-KOPA, is very product focused, customer empathy focused. So I actually haven't noticed many differences in terms of the ceremonies we do. The stand-ups, the retros, working with engineers, data scientists, the kind of technologies we use are similar. Back-end technologies, Android development, that sort of things. I actually used to work for a company here in Europe that was quite similar. It was like a digital bank. So a little bit to what like Tolu is doing for Brass. The area that I found different is I've had to kind of remove some of the biases as an African I myself had. So, how we think about how our customers interact with an Android app or an iOS app is very different to how that customer might interact in France or in Singapore. So I think that's where the difference lies, is like, everyone wants value, but I think the African customer or the African consumer, from what I've seen, can appreciate simplicity, whereas maybe in other markets, they want a little bit more, what I would say, almost unnecessary complexity.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
No worries.
So I want to know, because part of what we're discussing in this live is we're not just talking about your roles as product managers, we're looking at the larger ecosystem, right? We're looking at startups, we're looking at why this role is important to these early and growth stage businesses and why they shouldn't scrimp on the role. So why is it efficient? Why is efficient product management a critical consideration for founders looking to build successful businesses? And what happens when they don't prioritize it? I'd really love to hear you take into consideration how some of these startups might be bootstrapping, they're in the early stages of funding and all of that. So, Yami, I'd love to hear from you on this.
Okay. So I think that I'll probably say that depending on what stage you're at, you might be able to afford not necessarily having someone who has to focus. Someone whose role is defined as a product manager. What that would basically mean would be that the founders are the ones who are playing the product management role. So I think the most important thing, right, is that you have, you're actually abiding or living by product management principles, regardless of what stage you're at, right? Because you might not have the capacity to actually pay someone to do that job. But then you also need to pay attention to when you probably need to then hands off and actually get someone to pay attention to that. So I think it was Tolu who was sharing when you had to step in because founders had to focus on other things with respect to getting, investors to come on board and all the other things that, all the other operations that are required to actually make a business successful. So there'll be that time where you as a founder would need to step back and then actually bring on a product management person. But maybe when you're starting off, you might not necessarily need to have a dedicated role for that. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is actually that you are living, and running your processes, factoring, the different product management frameworks and principles, and just making sure that you're actually building a product that would be successful at the end of the day. So that's kind of how I would look at it.
Yeah, very reassuring answer there. So do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna do the whole actual physically raising my hand up if I need to say anything. So just to add more to what Yemi has said,
Yeah.
you can get away with it if you are a very like early stage startup, because the truth is you're still testing waters. That's the truth. Like you don't know what is going to resonate with your users, and for all intents and purposes, you'd realize that you just have one singular roadmap. So essentially, you have a couple of products, key products, like fundamental products that you expect that, you know, for example, a business bank should have. For example, a ride-sharing platform, there core products that you think you should have. But what happens is, as you're hitting these milestones, each of these products, they need their own care and attention. That's the truth. You can build, for example, I can build a feature or a product called cards on a bank, right? But if I turn my attention from cards and I look at the next thing for me, what's going to happen is 2 years down the line, you see products out there, entire companies that are focused on cards alone that are doing better than you at cards, right? So that becomes an important indicator. You know, you can get away with it as you're starting, but by the time you have like 2 or 3 products and you realize that, you know, there are products out there that are doing better at these things that you really need somebody to take care of the growth and evolution of that product.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that seems like both of you are coming from 2 different directions, kind of.
Why would you say that?
No, I wouldn't say that.
You didn't seem to look at the fact that some of these early stage startups might not have enough money to hire experience.
I mean, we're pretty much saying the same thing. If you don't, I mean, more often than not, you're probably bootstrapping, or you know, you have like $100,000 in pre-seed or $200,000, and you want to make the best out of that money. You don't exactly need to, because like I said, you're testing waters. You don't know which product you should hire your first product manager for. That's the truth. You don't know. You release a couple products, and depending on how they resonate with your users, companies even entirely just pivot. You know what? We're not doing all of these things anymore. We're just doing this one thing, right? And you need to hire for that. So you don't know yet. You know, manage your resources. At the end of the day, developers are like, you know, really important because they have to actually produce the work for the users to use. Designers also. Product management, like I said, is a thankless job. And as Yami has said, you don't exactly need it, so long as you're abiding by the product principles, like the product management principles. At the end of the day, if everybody is really accountable, as you know, people should be in very early stage startups where there are like 3 or 4 people, there's like, you know, it's very easy to manage at that point. Even the CEO or one of the co-founders can actually do that by themselves.
Yeah, that's very true. So I want to draw us to something that that came up in the presentation from TIS Insights, which we saw some minutes ago. And that's the fact that the fintech industry hires way more PMs than any other industry in Africa. I found that to be very interesting. Before I saw that slide earlier today, I just didn't think that there was, I imagined that, okay, perhaps the figures would be pretty much equal across the board or something but apparently fintech is first in class in so many things, including understanding the need and the importance for product managers. So, and I'd love to hear from you, Jan, because you're with Cowrywise, right? And so, do you have any thoughts as to why this is?
I think one of the reasons why, you know, it might be that way is because we actually also have a lot more fintech products. We have a lot of people who are working towards building fintech products than we have people who are looking at building products in the education space or in health space or in any of that, you know, those other spaces. And I would also say that just looking at how the fintech industry has grown, like, I mean, there's a lot more growth there than you would probably pick with other, you know, industries, which probably still ties back to the fact that there are not so many people who are, you know, currently focused in those particular spaces. So I would say that that's one of the things that's probably, you know, affecting how that's spread or why that spread is the way it is currently.
Yeah, and if I may, Kelechi, I think just jumping on what Yami is saying is ultimately that's where the money has been going. I think if we look at the funding that was, I think it was last year, maybe about like 4.5 billion in disclosed funding went to fintech, and therefore it makes sense, as Yami said, there's a lot more fintechs in place. Like on this call, M-KOPA is a fintech. So what we are is we are a platform that that allows our customers, underbanked customers, to get access to products and services that they can own without collateral or guarantor. So we are a fintech platform. Yami works at Cowrywise, fintech. Tolu at Brass, fintech.
Yeah, fintech, yeah.
So you can see already why that would be. The other thing that I will say is, I think fintech is a natural place for tech investment because the rails have already been built. We're building off the back of payment services. So like my focus is primarily in East Africa. And in East Africa, there is a payment solution, M-PESA, that was built in, I think, 2005 or 7, works fantastically, huge numbers in terms of like payment disbursements, transactions. And so it's easier, and there's APIs available from all the different kind of telcos. It's easier for a fintech to build on top of that, rather than going into like agri-tech or health tech. It's a little bit harder in that sense.
That's very true. I mean, financial infrastructure, generally speaking, even if we go back as far back as the legacy ones, is way more structured than, say, maybe agri-tech, many African countries. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So do you have any thoughts?
I agree completely, because where the money goes, the ability to scale happens more often than not there. But in addition to that, I would say it's a very, how do I put it now? Because there's a lot of regulatory and compliance hurdles in in fintech that you really just want every single product you build to have its own specialized team. Because I mean, other like subsectors, you can get away with probably one product manager doing like 2 separate products, but it's not really that easy with fintech, because you wake up every day and then one thing is changing. Like he said, the rails have already been built, right? You wake up one day and you realize that, oh my, I've built a couple of products on top of this stack, and this stack is buggy today, right? Somebody needs to be on that. Somebody needs to be actively thinking about how to evolve that. And it really just is that, like, also socioeconomic factors. You really want people, like, as much research as can be done before you launch any product, as much care and attention. The African market is weird. It is just weird. It's just the way it is. Like, there are products and philosophies and ideas that you probably see working outside of the continent, but when you bring it here, you realize it's not working, and that you need to be able to understand that market very well before you attempt anything. Matter of fact, I'll assume if companies are big enough, you have that much money, before you even do anything, any product, get a product manager to map out the area, see what's going on, and how to effectively build it so you can avoid like common pitfalls before you actually do anything at all.
Yeah, and something both you and Makera have said just makes me think about what the figures would reveal if we were to compare the rate at which fintechs fail with the rate at which other fintechs fail. So, I mean, when more money is going to fintechs, for example, and they're able to hire more product managers compared to other sectors and all of that, who knows what effect that, what outcome we could be looking at. So maybe fintechs might be in a stronger position to succeed than startups in other sectors. So yeah, that's just something I just kept rolling in my head right now when I went back these slides and these stats about startups failing because products are not the right market fit and all of that. So thank you for your
sorry. On that, I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing, because of the investment, because of the previous rails, and actually what Tolu mentioned about regulation, governments are starting to focus, like the first place they're putting regulation is, again, around areas where it's, there's payments, so like, or cash loans. I think there's examples in Kenya, there's examples in Nigeria, Like in Kenya, the CBK, Central Bank of Kenya, is, in September is bringing out a whole raft of regulation, which is ultimately good for the customer. It protects them against kind of like predatory lending. So the government, the money, and the historical rails are in this area. And what we're seeing is, if you look at the companies that have exited or that have a valuation, it's mainly in the fintech space. It's companies like Flutterwave, Paystack, it's Cellulent, MFS Africa. Either they've exited or they've IPO'd or someone has acquired them. And I think we'll see that until that space is very mature. And then we can, as Africans, as investors, we can start moving into the other areas where we still need to focus on. So I think you need to have the rails, the infrastructure in place before you can start thinking about creating like social apps, because it just makes it a lot easier. I have an example from when I was, again, years ago, I tried to have an African startup. That was called Safaris. So basically think of it, it was a African TripAdvisor. So people would always ask me like, hey, Makera, where can I go on safari in Tanzania and Kenya? And I got tired of people asking me that. I was like, okay, well, let me build this website like TripAdvisor so people can find tour operators, safaris, and book through it. But at the time, and I know you're going to ask me when it was like 2008, so calculate. None of these rails were there. There wasn't even like, I had to build my own login. I had to build my own like CMS. There was definitely no payments, but like, that's a completely different picture to it is today. Like you could have Facebook login. There is an easy CMS you can use, template, whatever you want. And there's definitely payments, and not only payments to like Visa or MasterCards or the fiat countries like in USSD, but you can also get payments to mobile wallets and all that sort of stuff. So I think things have changed, and that's why we're focusing on that element around the big rails.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that. So, Busayo, I want to ask you, what are the most important factors to take into consideration before launching the product in the African market?
Sorry, you said before launching a product.
When you launch the product
and then
in the African market, right? So, what do you consider?
All right. So I think, especially when you put the word in, the African continent, I think it's just all about context. Not really before launch, but before you embark. Sorry?
You're sounding rather distant. Could you project?
Oh, wow. Let me see. Any different?
Yes.
Sort of. Okay, I think I'll just project. I didn't do anything actually. I just project. So I think it works every time. I think one of the things that I think, like, I guess what I define is the most important thing that is called is research, and not just research as per research to validate your ideas or whatever. Research to more like be surprised, research to discover things that you did not know before. So for instance, what people always say is that nothing is new under the sun, right? So whatever it is that you're trying to build, very likely someone in some kind of developed country has tried it before and it doesn't work. So people think that, great, we can just pick what they have done, copy it and like replicate it here, right? But what is very important is to now research the specific context here in Africa, like whether it's the fact that people are living below poverty line, or it's the fact that people typically buy 10 MB of data as opposed to unlimited data that they buy in certain places and things like that, and how it affects your product. So first things is research, and do your research with that context. And before you launch, you want to make sure that you test your product in those specific contexts. So for instance, a good example would be our work with my first project actually, named the one for video observed therapy for tuberculosis patients. Video observed therapy is something that is widely accepted in European countries, especially with the pandemic, and we say, how can we replicate it here? But the issue is, the first version of the product that we did was uploading videos of, the one video per day was about 100 or 200 and something megabytes, and then we were thinking, oh, we have such an amazing product, you know, and then we were like, oh, so we now have to test it, you know, with this random person's, you know, phone and where they live and things like that. And the videos will be sending for days and it will not upload. So we had to start to find a way to make sure that we're able to reduce the quality of the videos that we are uploading, right? While also, reduce the size while also not completely ruining the quality of the video. And that one particular thing, you know, making sure that every step of the way when we release anything, we're testing based on that specific use case. Like this thing must always be able, like that's, I don't know, that person along your street that lives in a 1-bedroom apartment and the phone that they use should be able to use this product because they are who that we are you know, building for. So I think, yeah, basically one of the most important things, I think if we're looking at the context here, is to identify what is specific about where your specific users and make sure that before any release you are testing, you're making sure that you fit into exactly, you know, those use cases. Anything else is going to be the basic things, you know, you want to, you know, do your research, you want to build your product, you want to, you know, but I think that's, you know, something that stands with me, especially from the products that I've worked with in the past.
Yeah, great. Yummy. So how do you what do you consider when launching into an African market? I believe Cowrywise is Nigerian market, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Part of an African market, of course, yeah. So.
Yeah, so I guess the long-term vision is actually the African market. So let's say we're starting with the Nigerian market. I probably would just actually use that as a way to speak to that. So I think one of the ways that people tend to launch products, like just looking at products that we currently have, is just to add to what Busayo already said, because that specific context is actually very important. That understanding of who am I trying to serve, and then trying to understand the context of the people that you're building your products for, because if there's no alignment between, you know, how the people you're building the products for are going to look at using the product and then what you're building, then you probably would have issues. So I think something else that you can probably also consider is how to, I would say, phase your launch, which is why I'm saying, I can speak from, you know, the Cowrywise context. So you can have a vision to serve a very, you know, large audience. You want to build a product that anyone in the world, right, would use, or anyone in Africa would eventually get to use, or anyone in Nigeria would eventually get to use. And then you can say, let me start by, you know, working with the Lagos space, right? Or let me start by working with a particular state in Nigeria and then seeing how they get to interact with that product, because you would find that even within a particular country, you probably also have different contexts that you have to work with, right? So the way a Lagosian would interact with digital product will likely be different from the way someone in other western side of, you know, Nigeria would probably get to interact with it. It will be different from the way those in the east and, you know, other southern and northern areas might get to interact with that product. So I would say the very key thing is actually having an understanding of who do I want to serve, and then, you know, what's the context, and then probably taking it in bits to say, what's the very first thing that I need to, you know, confirm to say, to give me insight that this is actually working, right? And I think this is also where having that commitment to data is so important. Personally, I would say that data is something that made like a whole difference in how we build products at Cowrywise, right? So it's one thing to have that initial knowledge of these are the people I'm trying to serve, these are their context. And then it's also another thing to be able to see what are the things that I'm looking out for that would give me the signals to say this thing is actually working. So the job is not done when you've built the product and you've pushed it out there. It's actually also looking at, when I push it out, how do I get signals to say this thing is working? How do I track these signals? And then what would be my next steps? So those are some of the things that you actually want to be thinking about right from the start, especially when you're getting towards that period where you now want to even put the product out there and when the product actually goes out.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yami.
So your question is like factors to take into consideration before you start. I think mainly for me, I would say there's a lot of cultural differences, right? Behavioral differences between the way an African would accept the product and the way the product would be accepted in the Western world. And I'll give two sort of examples, and I'll use products that Makera spoke about now. Makera said something. He said, in terms of tech literacy, we are on two different wavelengths. That's the truth, right? You and I are on, Zoom and we're talking, but it's not like that everywhere in Africa, right? And, if you're really looking for market penetration, you have to be able to build a product that a lot of people can use, right? Not just the tech-savvy ones like us. And in Europe, like Makera said, they look for more sophisticated solutions to problems, right? Whereas here, people want it to be as dumbed down as possible, as fundamental as possible, right? That way it consumes less data, it's faster, and it's easier for them, to use. That's the first one. Now, when I mean cultural differences, what do I mean? I mean, let's look at examples so far, right? In the early 2000s, that was when the e-commerce, wave started, and it found its way to Africa. And what you'd realize is products, they had to adapt and readapt to certain things. For example, you order on Amazon, you're going to be paying before your product gets shipped. That's the truth. But in here, you have, Konga, you have Jumia, you have all of that. And you'd realize that more people, because of the low trust economy that we have, nobody's paying anything online. You give me my product, I'll give you cash when you get here. Same thing happened with Bolt and Uber, right? They could start collecting cash because they saw things were not working the way they used to, over there, right? And I'll also give another example. I don't know if Makera experienced this with his Safari project that I was building, but what you'd realize is you're going on a trip to London, for example, you want to book your hotel, accommodation, everything before you actually leave. But in Africa, right, most people, they go on, the websites for Africans to check like hotel prices. For example, I go to Just tomorrow and I don't know where to stay, right? I will most likely, because of the kind of person I am and because of the way the African conditioning has been, right, I will most likely open, my computer, find out the hotel, right? I'm not going to be paying before I get there, right? These are just like very small things, but they could actually decide whether or not your product survives. That's the truth, right? There are just cultural nuances that you have to pay attention to. That if you don't, it might just be the difference between your survival and your demise as a product, right? In addition to that, like I said, like the tech literacy, and another thing that I'm beginning to see is because of the global, financial markets and the way everything is moving, some countries get affected more than others, right? And we are beginning to see, more of that. And while building products, I think one of the very crucial questions you want to answer is this a product I can lift, I can take from here and move to another place, right? Is this a product that if I scale, what are my dependencies? What infrastructural dependencies do I have? What are their would I say replicas in other markets? If I'm to take this product from Nigeria today to move to Kenya or to South Africa, is this something that I can actually do? And within a quarter or 2 quarters, I've actually established a proper base in that country, because like I said, the financial markets are moving crazy, and you want to actually factor that before you build too extensively into like actual physical infrastructure that can't be taken, elsewhere. Starting again would be a very Herculean task, right? These are the things that I would pay close attention to before I decide what to build and how to build it.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. So we have just 4 minutes before we start to take questions from the audience. So Makera, I'd just love you to speak briefly on the question, what do you consider when launching an African market, especially from your experience? You started launching products for foreigners before coming back home. So.
Yeah, no, great question. And so I completely agree with everything everyone says. What Yami said, Tolu and Busayo, there's truth in all of that. And I want to touch on 2 points. The first is like Tolu's last question last statement around nuances. Like that's something that I also really believe, and I see it. So M-KOPA, like I said, is a financing platform that allows people to get everyday essentials. And we are now in 4 countries. So we are in Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, and Ghana. And we're launching in other African countries. And so we already see within our business the different behaviors. It's the same app, the same product, but the way people behave differently. So one quick example is payments. In East Africa, the way the M-KOPA product works is that like you can get access to a connected asset, what we call a connected asset. So let's, for example, a phone. You want to buy a phone, you put down a deposit, and then you make daily or weekly or monthly payments to that. And then you get ownership of it after 18 to 12 months. So it's a path to ownership for a lot of people who don't have the outright cash. But what we're seeing is in Kenya and Uganda, people, just from a structural, cultural perspective, they prefer making daily payments. So every single day they'll make payments, or they'll make a payment for 3 days. You know, that's what works there. But in Nigeria and Ghana, that doesn't work there. Like culturally, and even our customer type there is has a little bit more disposable income, so they're a little bit more salaried, and they preferred making payments on a weekly, monthly perspective. So I think when we first launched, we had the same stack around daily payments, but quickly found out, no, that's not going to work. So you have to have these pricing plans that allow monthly, weekly. Another thing that I really want to touch upon is like an experience I had in Uganda that talks a little bit about nuance, taking Uber. So I was there a couple of months ago looking at doing some kind of like customer research. And what I found was every time I would call, I would try and go somewhere with Uber, the Uber driver would call me and say, well, hey, where are you going? Cancel that ride and I'll come pick you up. And they would negotiate the price with me. And first I thought this was weird. I was like, okay, I'm not going to do this. But every single Uber driver kept doing it. And then I finally found out that's what everyone did. And when I dug into it, what essentially, the drivers are saying is that Uber wasn't accounting for fuel prices. So, something as small as like, Uber had built a perfect system, a great system that works all throughout the world. But in the Ugandan context, the drivers are so price sensitive to the increasing fuel prices that they were hacking the system and Uber was losing out. And I think other companies like SafeBoda and Bolt came in. Yeah. So I really want to stress on Tolu's point is like, you can have a product that works all across the world. But if you miss certain key things, culture nuances, either people will find a way to game or hack your solution or just won't simply use it. And then the final point is how M-KOPA has moved to many different markets. What we have essentially done is after like a lot of trial and error, again, to Tolu's point, Yami's point, there is a couple specific criteria we've identified that means we'll be successful in that country. So after several years in Kenya, we moved to Uganda. And then between those two countries, we figured out, okay, well, hey, what does success look like? You probably need to have strong payment solutions there. Like I talked about the rails. You probably need to have strong MNOs or telcos. So stuff like that can help you understand, hey, maybe this is not a market I'll go to right now because things aren't geared towards me. Like the regulation is not quite right for my business. So it really depends on what business it is. But I think you need to identify those 4 or 5 things. Was that within my 4 minutes? Good.
Thank you very much, Makera. That was really detailed. So now I can see that so many people have questions for our speakers, and we're going to get to these questions one after the other. Give me a moment to pull these questions up. So here we have Vijay Bala. Hi, Vijay. So how do you build the KPI for a PM? So who wants to answer that? How do you build a KPI? I believe the person uses in plural. How do you build KPIs for a PM?
I can start, and I'm pretty sure everyone can add their shares. So like in the businesses that I've been in, it's, there are often like company goals. So company mission, company OKRs that are set by a number of people. Usually it's executive leadership. And within that executive leadership, there's the product team. So there's a company goal. We want to achieve, 100 million customers in X years or in the next year. And then as it kind of goes throughout the business, you need to break that metric down and understand how each different org is going to contribute. So like if I'm within my org as like a product lead, what I will do is look at that overall company goal, look at the products that I have, and then try and always match whatever product metric we have to that. So if we want to reach 100 million customers, the metrics that are set by the product team need to map to that. Like, so one of the things we might look at is like, what is our conversion rate? Because you're not going to get to 100 million customers if people are dropping off your funnel. You know, what is like our virality rate? So again, it's going to change between different businesses, but it's not something that a product team sets independently of everyone else. Like, the product team is very much still part of the business, and there's a company goals, and the product team sets those, just like the commercial team and the marketing team would do the same thing.
Thank you, Makera. So just a quick note to the audience. We do have a post-event survey, and you're going to get it in the chat right about now. So please fill the post-event survey, give us feedback, tell us how we're doing and what we could do better. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on how to build KPIs for a product manager?
I think Makera has said it quite well, and it's pretty much, it's sort of the same for every other team in the company, right? Every quarter or every couple quarters, the company as a whole has, their overarching goals, right? What we want our company to be doing this quarter. So each team, each department will take from that. Everybody has their backlog, everybody has their product roadmap, and they begin to see which of our immediate tasks, right, would actually get our company to achieving these set of goals that they have, right? And if there isn't any, then you need to meet with your team and your product team and think about ways you could actually help the company hit that milestone.
Great, thank you, Tolu. BJ, I hope this answer was useful. So I have two questions. Well, one question, it's the same question really, but it's from two people, Adedolapo Ajayi and Bernard Lambok. So basically, this question is for you, Makera. So they want to know how they can get these free materials that will help them in developing themselves as product managers.
Yeah, sure. I can list a couple off the top of my head. So the one organization that I know that's quite good, and they're not paying me for this, but maybe they should, is called what's it called now? Lost of it. Like the product school. So I think, let me just type it up. I think, yeah. Like I said, there's tons of stuff that you can also find on the web. And maybe what we could do after this, Kelechi, is I can find, actually, what is it called? Yeah, the product school. So yeah, productschool.com, free online resources for product managers. So there's just one. And like an easy way to do it is just like, yeah, just type in free product management courses. But obviously you want to get something from a reputable organization. And I know the product school to be quite reputable in that sense. But I think, Kelechi, maybe something that TechCabal wants to do, because there's a lot of aspiring product managers, product designers, is literally just put together a bunch of resources to provide to folks. But yeah, I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, that's one you can use.
Yeah, thank you very much, Makera. This is really useful. Adibulapo and Bernard, I hope this answers your question. Trinity Madekwe says, how do you know if your product is viable in the ideas stage, especially when there are no funds for thorough market analysis? Also, at what point should you scale up your product without running the risk of scaling too soon? This is really loaded. So who would like to take that?
So I think I can speak to the first, and then someone else can touch the second. So with respect to knowing how viable your idea is, so I think sometimes where we get stuck is because we think that we have to blow so many, bells and whistles in order to actually test out your product. If you already know that you don't have a lot of funds available, or at your disposal, so there's nothing stopping you from actually starting with, if you define that these are the kind of people that you're looking to have use your product, right? If you look around you, you would most likely find people who are representative of that audience that you can start with, right? So I can't remember the company now, but I remember reading about a particular founder, or we go to the Apple store and then change. They would usually have like devices on display, so it would change the wallpaper to reflect his company, and then would speak to people and say, "Oh, have you heard about this company? It's this, that," and then it would start talking about it. And that was kind of how we realized that the initial audience that it was thinking would be the people who would be interested in the product were not actually, it was Pinterest, will not actually be the people. So it was initially building for tech people, but then realized that tech people weren't the ones who were going to be interested. I think he went for an event where there were mostly, bloggers, ladies, right, who were attending that particular event. And when he talked about Pinterest, the organizer of the event, the interest that he got from her, right, our response was different from what he had seen with the tech folks that initially thought would be interested in it. So there are different ways that you can actually test out if your idea is going to be viable or not, right? That there are always opportunities. So there's always the saying that look at the people you're trying to attract. Where would you find them? Go to those places and then look at ways to pitch your ideas and just kind of get feedback, get their responses, and then you can take it up from there. So you won't always need to spend a lot of money before you actually get some feedback on if your idea is viable or not.
And I'd say perhaps the most important thing is to keep an open mind, because your audience is likely to come from the most surprising of places. So the people you think you're building for may just not be the people who eventually you have to build for. Busayo, would you like to speak to that question, or do we go to the next?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think I'm with Yanni on this, but a quick example on my end also was a product that I worked on, very recently. And in order to test the ideas, we really just, had conversations with current customers of the company, just to see, like, it was very, very, casual, but we had our whole plan to have conversations with about like 10 of the current customers, the way, other businesses. We had, very casual conversations, but we knew exactly the kind of answers that we were looking for. It didn't cost us any money, really. It just cost us adding some conversations to meetings that we're already having with them. In other cases, before you build your product, maybe you can have some kind of, what people typically do is start to, test with like, their designs, depending on the product that you're building, really, like, do a really realistic prototype and try to get people to interact with it when you see them. You obviously want to start with people in your circle, but also, people in your circle might hype you too much. So you need to be able to know exactly what you're looking for, as opposed to just asking, leading questions and things like that. Aside from that, I guess the question about, scaling too soon, that one is, it's complicated because sometimes you have to scale because of what is happening, like the competitors, like you have to quickly, catch up with them. But sometimes you really just have to wait until you get the first version right, until you have, you have a very stable version before you scale.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Trinity, I hope that was useful for you. So this Olakuni says, how would you describe the difference in function of a BA and a product manager in practice? I'm not sure I know what a BA is. What's a BA?
Business analyst.
Yeah.
So
I think the difference is actually within the actual job title, really.
Okay.
If you look at it.
Oh, wow.
As a product manager, focus on the business, but you are people first. You are people first. Without people, you have no business. Right? But a business analyst doesn't know jack about, you don't understand the user, but you wouldn't understand. It's not the job of the business analyst to be looking at cultural nuances as much, to understand why they are mainly, financial viability of this business, right? To analyze the market, the factors that would influence people paying or how the company can generate revenue from this product, right? But as a product manager, you can, obviously the business needs to make money, but you are people first. Don't forget that. And that's why I think, product designers, UI UX designers are in a perfect position to transition if they're looking at that, because you already have that people mindset, right? You have to make sure that whatever it is the company wants to put out, whatever product, needs to be the best possible one for the people, right? For example, the job of a product designer and a product manager to some extent is to actually figure out whether or not the people need the product, whether or not they need it. It's your job to find out, right? Whether or not they need the product. So you're driven more by the needs of the people than the business, right? The business analysts can do that side of things.
That's a very interesting distinction. Makera, your hand was up, was it?
It wasn't up, I just interrupted, but yeah, that's just me.
Okay.
No, the one thing I would just, so I agree with Tolu what he says in principle. I guess the one thing I want to stress to the audience is that, you know, these roles, they're not necessarily distinct. Like, I know a lot of product managers who were great designers, who were great BA and business analysts, who were engineers. So I think while Tolu's right, like a business analyst in its purest sense or a product owner might not be required to think of the nuances, might not be required to think of like commercial aspects, like cultural aspects, like rollouts of things. They're just like, hey, look at a specific tasks. I do want the audience to go away with the fact that if you are a business analyst today, you could be a product manager tomorrow. If you're an engineer today, you could be a product manager tomorrow. And just like Tolu started in design and he became a product manager. So like the roles are less important other than when you're in them for what they do.
Yeah. Sometimes the boundaries between these roles can be really blurry. So Pet Wilson has a question. Pet Wilson Olatunde. So he says, how do you manage the management when you, as a product manager, is prioritizing features, but the management keeps bumping you to add some features, which when started will definitely sidetrack you. Now, this is even after trying to inform them of the need to follow through with the features backlog. So we are laughing. So this
is a very personal. No. It feels like a very personal question. It feels like finally I have this opportunity to talk, right? The one thing that I would actually indicate is a company that either they're not product driven or they're not in touch with what they actually need. And it involves, for example, like setting overarching company goals. Everybody needs to be involved. Every key stakeholder, like very top management, and people need to be involved, right? And if you realize that, you're being sidetracked, right? All you simply have to do is explain the impact of these products that you have in mind to, the stakeholders, right? For example, you want to, move away from just saying, oh, we want to build this and this and this product because of this, right? But you now want to be going in with the mindset of, if we've done so, and so, these are the impacts, right? This is how it would move us in terms of financials, in terms of, user growth. This is the impact that it's going to have, right? Meanwhile, if we do what you're, asking us to do, the impact is not going to be as much. That's how I would approach a situation like that. But it's always dicey though, because they pay your salary, but you just have to find a common ground, to express your ideas, right, to the management team.
Yeah, Busayo, any experience here?
Oh, I mean, like you said, it's very personal. But real quick, a hack that I think I have tried before is just I almost never use it unless I'm in this kind of situation, is building this sort of like, decision matrix and getting everybody to commit that these are the key values for every feature that we want to, pick or select in this, release. And we have to sort of like rank this feature as to how well does it help us achieve this particular value. So on every list of features, you have like sort of like an aggregate of, the weight of this feature based on the, values, that we have agreed before, maybe like sort of like revenue or like it would increase, our, daily averages as well, virality or things like that. So if it's getting hard and, we're talking and it's not making sense, just show them the numbers, really. Just show them the numbers.
And does it always work?
No, it doesn't always work, but it helps you. So it gets you close. If what you're saying is clear enough, and the numbers back you up, the best you can do is make your case. If the owner of the company says, no, I put my foot down and this is what we are going to do, you don't want to get fired, but you need to make your case. And that's how I would make my case. Constantly put the numbers out there so everybody sees it.
Tolu, you wanted to add?
Yeah, so another thing I found really useful, right, is trying to bring the key players into it. For example, management wants you to build X product, right? And depending on where you are as a company, as a product team, there are times where you need a quick win as a product team. You just need something out there. You've been building and building, but you just need something to do X, Y, and Z, right? And one of the easiest ways to determine what to build next is to have an effort versus like value, chart, right? Where you get the designers, you get the engineers, and you realize that it requires this amount of effort to build this product, and it will have this impact, right? And then you do that for all of the products in consideration at that time. And then that will give you a proper sense of, as the business owner, would you want us to wait 4 months, push out this product and get this result? Or would you rather we spend 3 weeks, push out this product and get that result, right? It's always good when people have the ability to compare the impact between, all of the products being considered at that time. That would actually go a long way in convincing them, rather than leaving things up for, their minds to make up, leaving things arbitrary like that. It's always better when, you've had insights from the designers, the engineers, and this can be done in, X amount of time, and it would improve our users' lives, this way.
Yeah, just on that front, I put in the chat a good framework to think about. It's called RICE, which I think is like reach, impact, I forgot what the C is. Oh, confidence and effort. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like to the gentleman who asked the question, you might try that framework and then show it to the management and say like, look, you have these 10 different features that you want. Here is, using the right formats, how much effort and the inputs, this is the outputs of like the work of effort. Like, what do you think? And have a conversation like Tolu said, like Busayo said, of what moves. One thing I will say is, and I think all the PMs are taking it personal, is like, whatever product company you work for, this is always going to be a challenge for product managers. So, you need to find the right framework. But yeah, I mean, I just came out of a meeting with the senior executive team pretty much on the same thing. Like, what are you going to build? Like, how do we speed things up? So I think if you have the frameworks, it helps you, meet that challenge in a way that everyone can get on board.
Yeah. If I can just add something real quick.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. So I think everything that Makera, Busayo, and Tolu said is something to keep in mind. I would just also really want to touch on the fact that as a product manager, you also want to make sure that the features that you're actually building are things that would actually bring value to the business. Because there are cases where you're building out a roadmap and you're pretty much focused on, or at least what you communicate to senior executives is that you're focused on nice to have, and they're looking for things that, that would move the business forward. So there has to be a balance, right? There has to be a balance. So while you're building out the roadmap, you also have to be factoring, which goes back to where we talked about KPIs. You also have to be factoring what exactly is the business trying to achieve and how does the product come into play, so that there's, sort of like that alignment in that space. And then it would help with cases where it then looks like, things are just randomly being dropped at you. So, yeah.
Right. So just another quick reminder to the audience, please fill out the post-event survey. You're going to see a link in the chat box. So fill it out, give us feedback about TC Live, tell us how you feel about it and how it can be better. So I really like this question because it's about growth, it's about mentorship, right? It's about people looking to break into the roles you guys already occupy. So this person, Deborah Oluwatoyin, says, what would you look out for in a junior PM or someone seeking PM apprenticeship or internship? Yarmi.
So I think one of no. But yeah, I think one of the things that would probably look out for would be, one, I would say your thought process. And that's pretty much something that would come up, say during an interview, or if we were to give you, something to work on, right? Like an imaginary product. So what I'll be looking out for is probably, how are you thinking through this thing? And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? which would then be the second thing, which is that willingness to learn, and realizing that at the end of the day, as much as the product manager is the one trying to, work with different people, you're really not the one who has all the answers to everything. So you need to be able to have that, I probably say like a stakeholder management skill or people skill, because you're going to be dealing with people a lot, right? And you have to have the ability to be able to say, well, we're trying to build this thing. I want to get your perspective as an engineer, or I want to get your perspective as someone who is in support. Is this something that you've seen come up with, in conversations with customers? So there's that aspect of how well you're able to relate with people and, pull people and get them to just have everybody be in sync, that to work on, on stuff. And then communication will probably be the last part. So those would be three things that I'll be looking at.
Right. So just quickly, we have, in addition to the post-event survey, we also have a poll. So you're going to get a link in the chat box as well, and you can take the poll as well. You can vote. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's not even the chat box. It's, you're going to see it on your screen. Anyway, so do you have any thoughts on what you would look out for a junior PM?
Oh no, I completely agree with Yami there. I think to me, the main thing I'm looking for is your thought process, right? And how best you can handle certain things. Because at the end of the day, in the life of a product manager, you're pretty much putting out fires every day. So you just need somebody that knows how to prioritize tasks and can thoroughly get into a problem, focus into it, solely into that problem and find answers, right? While still maintaining that sense of balance, what's going on. That's pretty much what I'll be interested in.
All right, thank you very much, Tolu, for your answer. Thank you, Yami. Thank you, Busayo. Thank you, Makera, for sharing your thoughts on these questions, and also for a very enlightening conversation around what you do, why it's important, and so on. So we have so many questions coming in from the audience, but unfortunately we can't take every one of them because, well, everything enjoyable has to end at some point. So again, please take the poll and also take the post-event survey. It helps us in the work that we do. It helps us to refine what we're doing here at TC Insights at TC Live for TC Insights. So yeah, so any final thoughts? So I'm just going to go around to get your final thoughts. Things perhaps you want to cover that we didn't quite touch on during our conversations. I'm just going to begin with you, Busayo. Busayo, are you there? Have I lost you or have you lost me?
I can hear you. So I think it's probably from Busayo's end.
Okay, so maybe I'll wait for Busayo's network to kick in or something. So, Yami, final thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I'll just touch on something based on some of the questions that I saw. So I know someone had asked about if how we found our niche in product management, and that probably stood out because someone else had also asked me that recently. So I would say that it depends, right? I don't know if I'm going to be in the fintech space forever, but that's where I am now. And I think that's one of the beauty about product management, right? Is that you can pretty much take what you do as a product manager from a fintech space to an ed tech or L tech or anywhere really that you find yourself. It's not even something that's also limited to the digital product space, right? There are product managers who can actually also work in companies where they're building physical products. So what I'm trying to say is you can thrive, right, in whatever space you decide to, go into. So you don't necessarily have to commit to a particular industry. So you can start from one industry, and if it really doesn't work for you, feel free to pivot and switch. I mean, that's really what you do as a product manager anyway. Yeah. You work on something, you realize it's not working, you pivot, right? So you can pretty much apply that same principle to your career, right? So you can start from one space, and if you feel like you eventually want to move into another space, there's room to do that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, good. Thanks for sharing that, Makera.
Yeah, no. So I'm looking at the poll, and I'm seeing basically like we have a lot of product managers on this call, product designers, aspiring product managers. I guess that the two takeaways. The first thing is if you want to either get into product management or get better at product management, like I said, there's tons of free information, like really reputable businesses or courses out there. I think a couple of people have mentioned some in the chat, so look into that. You can lean in a little bit more on like the customer empathy side, the UX side. You could lean in, I want to be a technical product manager, so there's a lot of free courses around how to code Python and whatnot, so you can better engage with your engineering team. Like, use our resources because it wasn't always there. The second thing I would also say is like, now is a great time to trying to shift into product management, especially in Africa. Like I said before, we almost $5 billion in VC funding was raised last year, and this is probably just a start because we're just focusing on fintech. So learning the skill set now will probably set you in good stead for the years to come. I know at M-KOPA we had recently a whole bunch of open roles. So I'll put the plug in for the HR team. Always look at the M-KOPA site on the careers page. As a company, we're growing. So feel free to have a look at that. If you want, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to give you some more recommendations. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Makera. That was very generous of you. Tolu, any final thoughts?
In terms of final thoughts, I'd say, if you're, moving to product management, I know it can be a handful, right? But my advice is to start with a domain you're very familiar, with like whatever you're doing right now. You can start with a product being built around that industry, right? At least that will give you one less thing to worry about in terms of, finding out, what the users would need and collaborating with, engineers and stakeholders to bring the product to life, because most of these terms and, technical jargon would be stuff you're already familiar with. So in terms of, transitioning, just be on the lookout for products that, are within a domain you are familiar with, right? That would just give you a better sense of, what's going on.
Thank you, Tolu. Okay, so hopefully everyone in the audience has filled the post-event survey. And so thank you very much, everyone, for attending this edition of TC Live. I really enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot from your questions to the speakers, and I also learned a lot from speaking with Tolu, Makera, Busayo, and Yami. This was really great, and hopefully sometime we do. So hopefully we do this again sometime in a bigger way. We have another event. It's coming up in 2 weeks on August 12th. So mark the date on your calendars. And this event is on the future of work in Africa. You're going to see a link in the chat box right about now. The event's on August 12th. It's the future of work in Africa. And yeah, so keep it with us, and there we're going to have a good time having a conversation around that topic. And so TC Live was produced by TC Insights. TC Insights, as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, is our data and events at TechCabal. So everything research, data, and insights that come to publication is the work of TC Insights, and they've been really busy this year. Please support their work as much as you can, and also subscribe to TC Daily. TC Daily is TechCabal Daily, which is our daily newsletter from Mondays to Fridays, and you're going to get a link in the chat box that tells you, that leads you to subscribe to the newsletter. Yeah, so that's pretty much it from me here. Thank you once again, everyone, for attending. Thank you to you. Thank you, Makera. Thank you, Yami. Thank you, Sayo.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Kelechi.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
It's all that we know.